Tonight is Oil of Tamuz. Let's say Monday Ayin Tamuz. Ayin Beis, Chelik Aleph. Dibra Maskul Vo Eya Etzloi Omein Pasha Bamidbo Tov Reish Ayin Dalet Omod Tov Samach Gimel. So we began with the new Pirush in the Zohar. But it's interesting, it's Pirush Tavki in Pasha Bolak. It's the Zazar Kodesh in Bolak Daf Kuf Tzadi Gimel Omet Aleph, and we happen to be in Pasha Bolak. So it's interesting how these things manage somehow or another to come together. And the Bia we saw was a dover a second pirush in the union of Havai Elokai Ato Kiasisa Felle, teaching the union of Pele Mamish Kemoishu. Now we touched Pele Meisius Aleph, and we saw that there was a union of Aleph Beis that the union of the Aleph, which as we had earlier in the whole Hemshach, is Malamed, or it goes down, and this Aleph, the union of Beis. And then we saw the union of the Shir of the Aleph, the Rosa Eloah of Adam Kadmor, which we saw was referring to Chochmah. And we saw that there's two arms on the middle line, and we saw that they were Chochmah Bina V'das, they were the union of sort of Chabad. And however, it's the union from how all of them are united in one union, all the three arms, literally, of the Aleph, all united in one, and therefore we saw that the union of the Chespen, Nirmaz, in the Ois Aleph is Echad. And he finishes in the Zohar, V'hainu ki asisa Fele. So now we see two inyanim, that on the one hand we remain with the Loshen ki asisa Fele, we remain with the union of Pele. On the other hand, we see that Pele is a union of Limud and Hamshocha, Dafke B'derech HaGilui, from Chochmah into Bina. In the first shot we saw we're going in the other way. We learned how Be'ika, it's referring to Chochmah Stimua, and we saw that's the Aliyah of Chochmah to be literally a Kisui le Keser Eloah. And we saw that was the union of the Tzada Elyon Shabamamutza, Chochmah Stimua, that is Mamish Oile El HaKeser, and becomes, as it were, a Kisui and a union Mamishin Keser. And we saw that was union from Tainug, Rotzen, Chol that we saw was there. Here we're talking about the mile of Chochmah al Skilui. And we went on to be Mafarish that immediate union of Chochmah as a Koyach and as a Sphira is the union of Davke Oyer Pnimi, and therefore Davke Gilui. And the rashis of Alinyonim, that it was Maramaz over there, rashis to Rosa Eloah, but the union of Chochmah is Alamo rashis Hagilui, and as we brought from the Zohar, in other words, the original union of Oyer, but Oyer Davke is also Ador Golui. Araya Chochmah mitad atzmo hi b'chinas Oyer v'Gilui, is on Tov Samach Gimel. Ufsi v'Chochmah techayei. We saw that the union of Chayei is b'Gilui Davke. That's the union of Chochmah. Inyone is lahachiyes. And therefore, the Chochmah is the shorish of the whole chayes of the elements as one on. It all begins with the union of Rashis Chochmah in Atzillah. Yeah, v'hainu the Ascholas Ha'esas Sfiras Ta'Tzilus. Well, that's the shorish of the chayes of all the elements. Hein mepchinas HaChochmah, meneshehi Rashis HaGilui. That's the union of the whole process of Gilui Davke, the revelation beginning to take into account the Makablim, as every Gilui takes into account that there's going to be a receiver of the Gilui. And therefore, the Inyan van Atzilus is Reishis HaGilui to be the Inyan Atzilus who liyesh Gilui. So that's the whole Inyan. Who begin the Yishtamidun Bay. Well, that's one of the famous Tamim for the whole creation, as brought down there in the Zohar, Pasha Boy. That brings it down over there, that begin the Yishtamidun Bay, that there should be entities and Nivroim, that they should appreciate the Abish, they should come to know him and have knowledge in him. So what are the media which the created entities, literally the separate entities, how do they come to a knowledge of the Eibishter? Well, that's through the Inyan of the Esser Sphere. The Esser Sphere is that medium whereby we come to know him, as it were. And that we see that the ratios of that whole process is the ratios of Dvorim Hamagulim, Dvorim She'inyonim Hu, Lahovi Esa'erein safely, they Yedir Davke in the Nivroim of Biyah. Over Pardes Kosov, Atzilas, that's one on the Lashon of the Pardes, Ki Atzilas, Shmoi Shel Ho'in Seif, Moira Al Atzmusai, Moish Kosov B'mokim Acher. Well, here we see in that Lashon of the Pardes two Ketzoves. On the one hand, we say that the Inyan of Atzilas is a shame. There's the one on in the Shem Havaya, which is closed in Atzilus, is Nirmas, Chochma Bina, and the Vav Gidus and Malchus. There's the one on. Whatever the close in the Inyan of Atzilus is the Esser Sphere, is that their Inyan is Gilui into Biyah. But he says over there that the Inyan of Atzilus is Shmoi, where are we? Shmoi Shala Ayin Seif, Moira Al Atzmusei. So Shmoi is indicatory of the Makabel. You're calling yourself a name for the sake of the Makablim, the other entity. Or you say that name is Miyuchad Mitatzmusai, because it's Moireh, the Shem, that's the Inyan of the Shem Havaya. So therefore we see that the Inyan of the Shem Havaya has in itself those two Kitzoves. Mitzadeh we call it the Shem HaEtzem, the Shem HaMagala Atzmusai Mamish. On the other hand, we say that the Inyan van Havaya, or the Lashon Yisavis, Lashon Havaya, that the coming into being of all Inyanim is through the Shem Havaya. Meaning that Mitzad Echad, Bitol, Legamre, Yichud, Mamish Patzmusei, Mitzad Hasheni, Shmoi Shal Ayin Seif, Legabi the Makablim, Legabi the Nevroim, the Beilam is Biyah. What is the Yom with that to Pardes? On the one hand, Atzilus is for the sake of the Makablim. On the other hand, it's Miyuchad B'Tachlis Boi Yizbora. Okay, as Cholos Atzilus u'Mepchinas HaChochma. And therefore, since the whole Inyan of Atzilus is Gilui to the Olam as Biyah, begin the Ishtamidin, and therefore the beginning of Atzilus is Chochma, Shehu Reishis HaGilui, the Inyan from Chochma is the very beginning of this whole process of Gilui to the Makablim. And Mamela Nimtzah, that Chochma, how it is in Atzilus, is Etzem Minyonai Gilui. But that's the whole Tachlis of Olam Atzilus. Ukamai came down in his Chochmas Timor. I my time that we learned in the Inyan of the Mamutah. There we learned that the Ike Mamutah was Chochmas Timor. And the Mamutah is for the sake of the Makablim, to be Makasha the Makablim also ultimately. Because that's the Inyan of the Mamutah, the Shai to the Makablim and to the Tzada Elyon. I don't ever say Chochmas Timor, seems to be moved out on Sosum from the Lashon Stimor, as indicated Stimas Behelem. So that was it that we know. The Amiti Shinin of Gam, Bechinas Chochma Stimor, Hari Mitzad, Shehi Bechinas Chochma, Hari Hi Bechinas Makoir HaGilui. Or the etzem fact that they call it Chochma, albeit Chochma Stimor, albeit that Chochma is called in Keser, in Arik, of a Sokos of Chochma, is the Gilui, even how it is in Keser. In other words, that it's the Inyan of the process of Gilui which will eventually lead into Chochma in Atzilus. And as well known, that albeit as a parser between Chokhmah Stimoa and Chokhmah D'Atzilas, one is called the Mokeh of the other. Chokhmah Stimoa is called the Mokeh of Chokhmah HaGluya. It's just that it comes in and even from parser. And we see by the Adam, the Chokhmah Stimoa is Ker HaMaskil, and the Gilui from the Ker HaMaskil is B'derech Nifla. Even from Helim from the Adam, not even from Ilav or Gilui, but even Hamasuda. But nonetheless, it is called a Mokeh to the Inim from Chokhmah Agluya. And therefore, said the Rebbe Kumta, he said even Chokhmah Stimoa, Harei. He said Mitzad Shehi B'chinas Chokhmah. Or that in Chokhmah Stimoa, which is called Chokhmah, Harei B'chinas Mokeh HaGilui. It's also the Mokeh to the Inim Agilui, albeit, even Nifla Mi'itanu, and as well known, but you get to the Nesivas HaChokhmah, with the Alinyonim, that they're Shorishes in Chokhmah Stimoa, and they come in and even from hiddenness, not HaChokhmah may Ayin to Motzei, as the famous Biur has it in many places. Nonetheless, he said, even in Keser, the Pu'ula and the function of Chokhmah is to be the beginning of Gilui to the Inyan of Atzilas. Therefore, he's going to bring now the Ramaz. Well, Lochein Be'emes Hascholas Atzilus. Well, we just learned and we just established that Atzilus Inyone is Gilui to the Olamas, begin the Yishtar Meidun Bei. Hascholas Atzilus Umi Chokhmah Stimoa. In other words, Okamesha Kosov Haramaz Pasha Mer Daf Pei Ches in the Zohar Kodesh Daf Pei Ches. But he writes over there, the Ramaz, that the Hascholas Ha'atzilus Klolos Inyan Ha'atzilus is Michokhmah Stimoa. In other words, that the actual beginning of Atzilus is in Chokhmah Stimoa. And even though Chokhmah Stimoa is Chokhmah Sheba Arich, it's not Chokhmah D'Atzilus, it's not Chokhmah Ilua of Atzilus, but nonetheless, the whole Tnua of Chokhmah being a Tnua from Gilui, therefore, even how it is called in the Inyan of Keser, in Yone is Gilui for the sake and the purpose that there should be Atzilus. That really Chokhmah Stimoa is the emissary coming into being of that Inyan Agilui. It's Lotcha Michael, how the Eibishter is Ma'atzil in himself, the Inyan Agilui, in order that should be Anasinas Mokim, albeit B'derech Pelech Kitzasa, B'derech Parsa, V'chulu, but it becomes a Mokeh to Atzilas, and that's the word of the Ramah. V'chein, who he says, Klolos Inyan HaChokhmah. Here is an amazing piece. This is one of these Inyanim that you find in this Hemshech, which how to call it, even though we're saying here that Chokhmah is Lashon Aleph, but nonetheless it remains Lashon Pele. V'chein hu said the Rebbe Klolos Inyan HaChokhmah am v'shor shoi u'makoiroi horishoi ba'atzmas oirayin tzei. He said, so is the Inyan of Chokhmah in its essential Mokeh and its first appearance of the whole Inyan of the Musik of Chokhmah in Atzmas. Now when he says Atzmas Erein Seif, then he means Atzmas. He doesn't mean Afilu Keser. He means Mamish Atzmas. So you might say, well, he says Atzmas Erein Seif, not Atzmas Mamish. So he means there a Kolo B'Atzmas. In other words, for all intents and purposes, like we find in Tanya the expression Kula Kamei Kali Chashivei. That's one other when the Alter Rebbe says that, he means they are a kol mamish be'atzmusei. The Ayin of Oirei Seif, he says, even in the very Atzmus himself, there's a Mokeh and a Shurish for Chokhmah. What is that? Shehu Inyan Ma'asher B'Yediyas Atzmei Yoideya Chulu. But that's what we find that Lashon in Tanya in 2 we find that in Geras HaKodesh the Alter Rebbe uses the expression Yediyas Atzmei Yoideya Es HaToiro, and then we find that in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah and also in other places in the famous Geras chapter 20, we find that he uses the expression that B'Yediyas Atzmei Yoideya Es Kol Aniyim that Kol HaOlam was Kol HaNivroim, that the Eibishter Kaviochu, by the fact that he just knows himself, Ali Dezeh Hu Yadet Kol HaNivroim. Like he's Marich and Perek Ayin over in Shara Yichud, but that's the whole Indian, and then he uses that to be choilech of the what you might call it, so-called wherever they were, whether he means the Talmidei Agro, or whoever he means that they were Shogagu, Hashem, Atuv Yechape, Ba'adam, etc., etc., that they misunderstood the union of Hashgacha Pratius, V'chulu, because he says that the etzem union that the Eibishter Kaviochu knows himself is Ali Dezeh Hu Yadet Kol HaNivroim, and that's what he brings the Rambam over, that Hu V'Yediosei Echad Hu V'Chochmosei. Over the Rambam uses the expression Hu V'Chochmosei Echad. So here we see that just like over there in Shara Yichud, the Rebbe teaches that is really referring to a form of Yediyah, even though we call it Chochmah, but we mean the union of Yediyah. And we're going to see further when we get to the union for Chochmah. And what does he mean? The Kaviochu, the Eibishter allows himself to know about himself. So ask yourself the Shaila, and Ali Dezeh, Umamer Yadet Kol HaNivroim, Akol Yadua Etzem. That's the famous Lashon, Galui V'Yadua Yizborah. He knows, but it's all Yadua B'derech Mameh. With that, the Alter Rebbe avoids the whole idea of him knowing, because knowing means like two entities that you come to know something. Yeah, but if it's Galui V'Yadua B'derech, it was always like that from way back. There was never any point where he didn't Kaviochu know. So here the Shaila is not so much a Shaila, how does he know, how that functions, because that's what he says over there, that's me Ayin Yonim, and that's what the Rambam writes, that Ein HaOdam Yodea Dov Hazeh Al Boiriyoi, Ve'ein HaOdam Yochel Lodas Dov Hazeh, V'chulu, the Rambam is married, that you can't really know exactly how that is. That's not so much the point. The point is, that what is the point, as it were, of saying that the Eibishter knows about himself? I mean, he anyway knows anyway. What is the point of saying Shehu Yodea es Atzmusei? If Atzmusei Tzeif is Atzmusei Tzeif, then automatically it knows anyway everything. I mean, the Eibishter being what he is by definition, Atzmusei, automatically everything must be Yadua Etzlo, just B'tzad the Atzmus. So why does he say that the Eibishter Kilu is Yodea Sat Musa? Why does he use that expression? So there was the Rebbe here. The Rebbe here is going to teach that that's Kilu in himself, a Atzilus, as it were, a bringing close or a making of an Indian in himself, that he knows something that B'lavach he anyway knows it. And so the fact that the Eibishter allows himself to, in Atzmusei is Barak, to be aware of something that he's anyway aware of it, in order that eventually there should be able to be entities that they would know him. Entities that they would know him, and therefore inside himself he gave the possibility of knowing him, even though he already knew anyway, and he didn't really need it. And we're going to see that he brings a Rai from earlier in the Hemshech. I want to say a Rai. He brings a Dugma lenient. So let's just learn it b'fnim rather than go into answer Arichas. V'chein hu klolos inyan ha-chochma. Now notice he says chochma. In other words, even though we're going to talk about what seems to be a lashon for das, Yodea, as such to say, we really mean the beginning of an awareness. That's what we mean. And the beginning of awareness is chochma. Because chochma is not seichel. And chochma is not a maila legamri miseichel either, as is well known in Perek Yudchet. Because legamri lemaila miseichel, das ist emunah pshuta, or das ist keser. And mamish seichel goloi is bina. You think, okay, what is chochma? So chochma is what we call yediyah. Chochma is in being aware of something. In other words, when you get the first gilui of chochma, you don't mashig anything. Even in the nakudas of chochma, you're not mashig anything. What you get is a tremendous revelation of the intensity and the profundity of the Indian Exodus in Havana Vasoga. Oh, you don't have Havana Vasoga. On the other hand, we can't say you don't have anything. All you have is just, Emuna, Pshitas Advekis, Mitzad Emuna, you don't have either. You have an awareness. And that's what we call in Chassidus Yediyo. That's called Yediyo. And it's not Meloshin Das, it's not Meloshin Hasoga. It means you become aware. You are aware of. That's the unit of Yediyo. And the fire, when in Atzilus, we want to, or even higher than that, in Chokhmas Timur, or even higher than that in this Indian, we want to be Shelo, our form of Yediyo. We say, Antu Chachim V'loi B'Chokhmi Yediyo. In other words, we're Shelo, Beis Baruch, our form of how we take Chokhmah. How do we take Chokhmah? But derech Yediyo. Therefore, the Rosh is talking, Antu Chachim V'loi B'Chokhmi Yediyo. Because that's the way we understand, or that's the way we appreciate, or we gain Chokhmah. And therefore he says in Atzmus, it's not your way, but it's the beginning of something which is a sinus mokim to them. And the Father Alter brings in Torah in the famous Maimah in Pasha Vayera, he brings it that anti Chochem Haloi B'Chokhmah Yediyo is a mokim of Shoyres that eventually there is Yediyo by the Nivroim and Biyah, even though it's a Loi B'Chokhmah Yediyo. Is a siman that it's made in such a way that it's only a shlila of what they will eventually get. Oh, but why did he do it? Eventually they should be able to get just we say the way it is, ben time, it's like atalo afilu b'diyadiya hazu lakach et ze, avol sofkos of tikach et ze, and v'eik tikach et ze, but even shal yadiya.
The madrigas that they're talking about here is also the mushak of almost the kladlerut.
Ad Mosai?
Almost the kladlerut. Yesh
almost
the kladlerut.
Leonard. What does he say?
Close. Almost the close.
Almost saying so.
Almost Atzilus that we talking about. That's Atzilus. That's Asiyah the Kadru. Lachon. So are these madrigas like talking about Atzilus the Kadru, Brid the Kadru, Atzilus the Kadru?
Yeah.
Higher than
Yeah, there's a Nachon it's not anyway against what we're saying. What we can say is that Antul Chacham Roy B'Chokhmah Yediyo exists on different levels. But what we're saying is that wherever it's L'mayla from Yediyo Sanivroim, then we say Antul Chacham Roy B'Chokhmah Yediyo. The point we're trying to make here is that we use the word Yediyo because we're only being Shoylol the union of Yediyo Sanivroim, but Madrega Ahi. Also, because of the way the Chokhmah functions is what we call Yediyo. Therefore, he's Shoylol with the word Loi B'Chokhmah Yediyo. So, I mean, you can talk about a Beis and Madrega Shataroite. You understand? You can talk about it in how does L'mayla Me'atzilus, how does in Akko. If you follow? Here we're talking about the Chiddush that we're making here, is that we're talking it in Atzmusay Yisparach. And here we mean Mamish Kolu Pi'atzmusay. So therefore said the Rebbe, Agili HaYediya, Gam B'Shor Shemakirim B'Atzmusay say, Masha B'Yediya Satzmi Yoideya, and therefore the Rebbe just says Chulu, because we use that in different L'shoim, noise. Harizeh B'Chidas Gilui Le'atzmusay Al Koponim. That's a Gilui Le'Gabide, the Atzmus Al Koponim. Because the very fact that we say, there should be Yediya Satzmi Yoideya, even though we don't mean Yodea in the normal way, because we say Yodea B'Tzad Yediya Satzmusay, but nonetheless he said the fact that you describe that means that it's already a Gilui Le'atzmai. The Gilui HaYediya Le'atzmusay, Hu B'Chtei Liyoi Seyidu B'Oilim. And here we see an amazing principle that all the inyonim, what Kaviyachal the Eibishter made, Mamish Mi Atzmusay Kipshutei, all the nuances and all the inyonim which occur, which imply that in some way the Eibishter is aware, or he knows what's going to be, or he knows how it's going to be. Okay, it's all of those inyonim are all for the sake of something. No, they're all for the sake of a movement out of himself. He doesn't need that cloud. What is the ultimate purpose? The ultimate purpose is to reach Yeah, the Nevroim. We'll soon see about that when I get to another famous Lashon which occurs. Yeah, the Gilui HaYediyah Li'atzmusei is in order that there should be Yediyah Ba'elamas. The Harei, L'choira Eino Muvan, Man Ish Chadish B'Yediyah Zu B'Atzmusei, Shaharei Li'atzmusei, Yodea Gam Kodim Sheret LaYediyah HaKlula B'Atzmusei. I mean, mitzad etzem, we pointed out a minute ago, mitzad Shleimus HaAtzmus, mitzad Kol musogim that we can possibly apply to the atzmas, b'derech hafroa haki atzuma, he anyway knows. He doesn't have to know. You follow? Anyway, it's all just automatically what you might call kalut, v'chalut, b'derech ha'atzmas, everything that anyway is there and is ever going to be. Follows, he said, why did he need to, as it were, say who you dare be atzmusay? So the Rebbe said that's in order to produce, Ayin, the koidim shenetz la'yediyah, ha'yediyah behelem be'atzmusay, v'lo yeh oz gilu yediyah klal. Nothing, no other entity or no other being could ever know him. In other words, he would only know him himself. Over, he said, what he's done is he's v'netz la'chochma. Now he calls it chochma, not yediyah. He calls it chochma, b'pchinas ha'iskalus b'atzmusay, li'es ha'yediyah b'gilui b'atzmusay al choponim, b'gdei shetiyeh atzilas b'pchinas ha'chochma, b'pchinas ha'yediyah b'neshamas u'ba oilamaz. Why Mashiach is boiling up Perek Mem Zayin. Now if you look up over there in Perek Mem Zayin, that's part of the language we didn't actually learn in these classes. But if you look up over there, then the Rebbe brings Bein Hadvarim, he brings the famous remark of the Rishonim, and I think it's also the Pardes and the other great Rishonim HaMekubalim. They say that everything that was Ne'atzal was Ne'atzal Tzorech HaOlamas. Kommen Sie again with the Kashia, that the Sedura Taich in Gedolei HaMekubalim, it's in the, I think it's Efshe status in the Zohar Kodesh Mashu Me'ein, we say, we state that L'Sha'alna L'Yomim HaRishonim, that you should ask for the first days, and that's referring to Midas. In Midas there can be a Ayin from Shaila v'Yediyah. But in Moichin, it's not Shaila, the whole Ayin from L'mayla mi'ah Midas, Lo Kaima L'Shaila. It's not Shaila, you can't ask anything, can't be Choycha v'Deirush anything. From that they reach the conclusion that the whole Ayin from Tzorech HaOlamas, the whole Ayin of Gilui L'Tzorech HaOlamas is from Midas Elamata. But the Ayin from the Moichin are not charged to the Ayin from Olamas, and Kaviyachol, they are only Li'atzmus the Ayin from the Moichin. And they bring a dogma from a mensch. Lamata, the Ayin from Moichin is Mavdil him from other people. The Ayin from Moichin is only Aisaskis B'Toich Atzmi. Can you do it? Before some the Ayin. Coming again with the Kasha, the Rebbe Odeh, he brings, as a state in the Kisvei Arizal, the Arizal says that everything is L'Tzorech HaOlam. Hakol, L'Tzorech HaOlamas. Afilu Chabad, L'mayla mi'ah Midas, he said it's L'Tzorech HaOlamas. I would just brought from the other great Rishonim, and from the Zohar Kodesh, it's not Sha'ad, the whole Ayin of L'mayla mi'ah Midas is Lo Kaima Shara, and therefore there's a whole beer in Sifrei HaKabbalah that the Ayin from Chabad is only the Tzorech Atzmei, and you can imagine him having Chabad even without the Ayin from Olamas. Well, this is an interesting one. What would he be doing with Chochmah Bin if he wasn't going to make Olamas? It comes again the Rizal, and the Rizal and Megala a whole new in, and everybody's right. That's very common in a way. Chabad understands the Rizal that he is Kilo Miyashiv, what appear to be all sorts of Inyonim, Loi, Muvonim, and Tzadstiras in other sources in the Kabbalah. The Rizal is Miyashiv. And what was it the issue? And they say that, hey, Nemes, the Inyan from the Moichin, Alagamri, L'mayla mi'ah Olamas, and since they're L'mayla mi'ah Olamas, and they're not charged to the Olamas, v'chuli, doesn't mean tzad Mailas HaMoim. It's a Minyonom, they're too high for the Olamas. to either be mashpia. Therefore, you can't ask her. You can't really be doidus and like you can in the middle. When they read outside that that's also the tzedakah element, who come to that? Come on, who's the vessel today? Who's the vessel today? Was it a beer? What he says here. The Rebbe says an amazing thing, that when we say that a mensch in Pnimis HaMoichen, he doesn't have any shaykhs to the Zulas, he said the two same things are true. On the one hand, when you're misasik in Ayin and Omuk B'teich HaMoichen, you're not shaykh to anybody. You can't talk to anybody, and it's not shaykh that anybody should be masik what you're being masik in the Moichen. However, so the Dr. Rebbe dot in the Ayin Beis, the Rebbe said that if you don't have this moichen in yourself, then what you are masi will never reach another person. Absolutely no way it'll ever reach another person. Because you never brought it into any form of gila etel atzmocha. To a certain extent, you never really know it yourself either. To use the expression. He said, why is it that you go to the trouble and your mind trains you that you do take things from Chochmas Timor, from the Koach HaMaskil, into the Askolas HaYediyah, and you do have a Yediyah, Mudu Mikol Sharei B'nei Adam. He said, but that's all in order that eventually you should be able to give over to the Zula. He said, Tachlis Kol HaInyonim Hu, the Yoram should be Megalit to the Zula. Mitalmida Yezim Muslim Talmidim. And so the whole Indian is to be Megala. If that didn't occur, but Moichoi, it wouldn't be shy to whole Indian his galas to the Zulas. Even though at that particular moment the Zulas may not be able to actually go into your Haskalah, but because I know exactly what you're being masked right now in the Pnimis Chochma Shel Hamayla Mi'anakuda. Ich weiß pinkt wo du hast den Kopf. He doesn't know. Weiß nicht. But eventually he's gonna know. Through the fact that you bring it down, do a gewisse Seder, and it will come out. But Luli Indians nobody would ever know. Kind of it going into this person. And it's a politic is that. So the Rebbe says the same thing, that Lamaila, the Eibishter is kind of nechuli. The Eibishter not to give anybody anything. Ulo, the famous expression from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Pnimis Atik doesn't know anybody anything. That's Pnimis Atik. No, the whole Kavona Elyoina, the whole Ganzner, ultimate purpose that the Eibishter had in himself, B'shvil Ma, Ayin Yoidim, that's what the Alter Rebbe said, of a Taivas, we can't really know from where. The Eibishter wants that there should be this Nasina Ella, whoever they're going to be later on, Ella must be, that Madrega, what and when. The Makabli was disregarded. The whole reason why the Eibishter made this Indian in himself, that he knows about himself. So he said the very fact that you use such a lashon and you say b'yediyas hatzmuzis b'yediyah is called adivarim, but that you're saying that he allowed there to come inside himself something which legabi him is absolutely perfect. Hatzmuzis hu yediyah v'lavo it calls it. Even that's legamri mufrach that at any point in history we should ever understand how he knows. What did he do? He allowed that to appear in such a way that eventually, after a whole series of your leaders, there should be a Yediyah in the Elam should be able to come to know him. Begin the Yishtan Midu in the Bay, it goes up into a very high clang. It goes into a high movement that Kaviyach, the Eibishter, made within himself as a movement, and that's called Chochmah. Neruftas on Chochmah. And when Chochmah comes down, it's the beginning of every Indian of making you a Mechutn. Chochmah is for you. Chochmah is already, I feel Chochmah Stimor. Ultimately speaking for you. I feel that Avusha Ilah, we saw that, how do we call it over there in the previous, but I only for Kisuya Ilah, that's also for you. Also for dear, that eventually there should be the Mekabel, and if inside himself the Eibishter Kilu allowed himself to know when he didn't really need that cloud, it's absolutely not Chaya. And Afal Pikain it's there. Amir said that that's why it is that when you know, and you begin to know, you also don't know, as the old saying has it, Nicht das and nicht dort. On the one hand, you don't know how Bina and Midas and all that take it. On the other hand, you don't really know, you get this tremendous connection. You get those, and you begin to struggle with it. Kilo, that something very high and Atzmistic has allowed you to move in here. In other words, that the Etzem Nefesh is somehow giving you down a hand. It's almost sort of put down and drawn you into the picture. And that's what we call Yediyah. Das heißt Yediyah. Das ist der Schörische Mochim, why he got Chochmah in Atzillah. That deep inside himself, the Eibishter Kaviyachal made a movement that he allowed that eventually he would think to say, when you have inside your brain a knowledge, nobody can ever know that. But if you wouldn't have had that, there'll never be a getting to the Zula. And why do you have that? Because he wants you to get to the Zula. And remember, the other morning I was looking at Perek Lamed Aleph, and Tana right at the end there in Perek Lamed Aleph, the Alter Rebbe, he brings the whole thing about Perek Lamed Aleph, you have to run away from the Nefesh HaGuf, Nefesh HaBam, the Tshuva, run up in the Nefesh HaLakis, be mistabak, forget the whole Guf, Nivze, Meshukhet, all run away, tears Mitzrayim, ki borach ha'am, and to do it. And then he says, yeah, and that's it. He means, why didn't the Shalom come down? And Eloi Assisi attacked me. What did I come down here for? If I'm supposed to run away from it all, what am I doing here? What's my Nefesh HaLakis doing inside something that we really recommend that you get away from here? Out here, Paul. All of a sudden, he says, the whole Ayin and the Nefesh HaLakis came down in order to be mild, and the Nefesh HaBam. He said, that's all. Notice when he puts in brackets, come on, ancient over there, who Tachlis Brias Hoel. That whole thing is Tachlis Brias Hoel. He franked my dear, you were holding in the 31st parak, right near the end, and all of a sudden he says, oh, by the way, I'm going to tell you a bit later in this book, what is all the Tachlis of the Brias Hoel? It's Simon that Ad Koyad Lo Dibano was the Tachlis Brias Hoel. Was it the ganze Tachlis, the ganze Bria? What Lord Rulecha? Right, everything we've done only for your benefit. It's all for you. We're telling you how to arrange yourself in such a way to know all these amazing, to know all about your koifas, you never did, and all about the shaman, about pnimis and shaman, about Mesilas Nefesh, about Torah, the Eibishter. Phrase nearest was. What not? What did he not tell us? I said, well, by the way, I'm going to tell you another few chapters yet. This what I just mentioned, that's going to be the Tachlis of the whole Bria. What have we been doing up to now? And where does he say that? Where does he say that's going to be the Tachlis of Bria? He says that you all came down and all to elevate your Nefesh. That's all he came down. Elevate your Guf and your Nefesh, and that's all. Go tell him, it's not going to, you'll find her, take out a sledgehammer and chase her. But the whole reason he came down is just to be Mali and that's the whole reason he came down, to be Mali and it was your Bami. Ayin told was, I came down for the sake of some Meshugan to her, that's why I came down. And Mel says the Alter Rebbe, later on you're going to find out even more than that. That's the Tachlis Kolabriya. Bishvil Zeh. The whole creation that you should do a bit of work. You shouldn't just sit in Gan Eden, you should come down and make Mivtoy. Geir Rois and Arbeit mit der Guf in der Nefesh HaBam is Bishvil Zeh Tayyaranet. It's the same thing here. The Eibishter's got everything. The Eibishter Kaviyachal begins the whole process of inside himself. He makes something that's only really for the ultimate sake of the Royim that they should come to know him. And welcome to say that inside the Eibishter, the racist Kolain on him is Mivtoy. That the Eibishter makes a idea that ultimately speaking somebody else should know. And who is it? This little the autumn guy way down there under Axilas and under everything. He drays around and as Meshugan Avelt. That's what the whole thing was for. That was the whole answer. Bishvil's there. And that was the whole thing. It says Chacham oven him to Lefizeh. Chacham is Gilui. That the Eibishter made Gilui. But really what you make Gilui, you're talking about a Makabel. Because Gilui means revelation. Revelation means to whom? to somebody. Chokma im kain is Yudiyah. Yudiyah is Gilui. Mishuma Gilui, to eventually reach another entity and teach him. And that's the Indian van Aleph Bina. Aleph Beis is Aleph Bina. You got to teach. If you got Chokma, you got to teach Bina. If you got Bina, you got to teach Midas. If you got Midas, you got to stray into Malchus. If you got Malchus, you got to go running out into Kaviochel, doesn't go for something and change the world. It's a movement, not every moment of your life, but you can do it. Edif, says the Rebbe, Harei. Now Harei is, look, you see, the Prince of Chochma, Prince of Gilui. In other words, this whole piece, it is to show that Chochma is Gilui. The Prince Keser, you say Keser is ein Arei Chaya. Oh, your Keser is ein Arei Chaya. He said, Prince Helem. Da Hashem Zenema Choshech. Nikram say, Choshech, Liyoiz Prince Helem. Aber Chochma is Oye V'Gilui. He said, V'yesh Loima, the Keser V'Chochma, Zeo Atshilas, Prince Choshech V'Oye. Well, the Mamish Apella. What have we done here? We've taken Keser, and we've put Keser Goren Psach. Had it cut into what you might almost call a rather unhonorable shell. And we said, oh, Keser is your old friend Choshech. And we're going to say that it's a Bria Mamish Neatzma. It's Ayin, and the Ayin from Chokma is a. Anyway, you want to persuade me that Keser is not oil or what? What on earth? What do you mean? If you're talking, it depends which way you're talking. If you're talking, mitzad, madregas in oil, and you're starting up very high, and you go and talk about madregas in oil, then maybe you can be tiny. You can tiny that purely in the etzem musig of oil, then Keser is a high oil, and Chokma is not such a high oil. The father's brought down. In the Arizal, it says that I had it cut. Shaverin say Meir bekiru makim bekeseru bechok. We see there's a certain, unification or a certain equalification in the two. Why do we say the keser is the independent equation? Because if you're talking now about the ultimate tachlis and your whole reckoning now is how things happen inside Alakus big day to go down, then the way that reckoning looks at Keser, it only sees Choshech. Well, that reckoning sees that Keser is too high for all that. And Keser is our stage where that's not happening yet. Keser is our level where the Makablim are not being Makabel anything yet. You're doing that for sake ultimately of reaching the Makablim, but they're not actually being Nenem is Klum, Bentai. Therefore, we call Keser the Ayin from Choshech. And it's like it's brought down in the famous lesson at Lekutei Tikkun Zoya. Afu gav the Keser Elyon. He oyer tzach or oyer metzuk tzach. Ucham hu gabi ilasa. The famous lesson is brought down almost in all of them shaking. In one place or another, that even though Keser Elyon is a oil tzach, it's a tremendously delicate light, and it's a oil metzuk tzach. It's even in that gufa, light shibah, it's like oil shibah, very intensive from oil. Ucham gabi ilasa ilay. That the gabi higher, and the gabi the ebishter mamish, it's ucham. So, but that's another type. That's not the types we're using here. Or we see the Keser is what you might say. Keser loses on both directions. if you take Mamish Atzmas Hamayitzil, Mamish Atzmas ain't say Vekshu Ulamayla Mikola Giluim, then Keser, is only even though it's a big oil, like Yavihim, that's a godness. This is Ayin for Ucham. And they call it darkness, brownness. The word Ucham in Aramaic means like brown or blackish. Like every day, this is mamish a hell of a hester. Also, if you're talking mitzad de'inin or the makablim, and what is the ever kavanah like we're talking here? Then Keser is too high. Keser is still mudul mikola giluim. It's mudul mikola saida, and therefore the gabi the amitis are makablim. It is a from Choshech, and therefore they're not able to be Yeah, they're not going to come in there with their yediyah. And therefore there's no such lotion, antu kesef v'loi bekesa yediyah, ain't דבר כזה. אלא antu chochem chachim v'loi b'chochem. In other words, we're shoyl the inim chochem von the yediyah. Aber, ultimately there is a inim von yediyah, and verkehrt, chochem is a inim von yediyah. Mashik in kesef, legabi all the mekablim, kesef being too high is called choisha. And therefore that's what we say in Yetzirah or Veirei Choisha. It's one on the famous spear in Syria. When you touch it, Tefillin Shaliad, Yetzirah Veirei Choisha. I don't tell them Abriya and I tell them Ayitzir. I don't tell them Abriya. Why do we call them Abriya Choisha? Well, that's one of the tamim. It's too high for the Makabel. If we bow, it's a heißt es Choisha. There's another beer. Was there? I was there when I get in your name. And I first said that kommt euch that the inyan von Chesed is not Yediyah, and therefore it's not Gilui. And even more than that, he said it's the inyan von Atzilus, Choisha v'Oyer. In other words, when the Eibusher was Matzil, how do you call it? He was Matzil Choisha, and he brought the inyan Choisha, he was Matzil the inyan von Chesed. Excuse me, my
that service, is this Orma service talking about?
It said, I saw a most amazing thing yesterday morning. Well, this one I can't remember. In the mikveh, I saw a very chosh-looking guy. That he took some sikh, was getting dressed. He's surrounded by people, he's half legamri or half chesed was. And he took the sikh, and instead of saying to the guy, listen, call me in another 5 minutes, I'll be outside the door. He stood in this long, he was looking up the sky and talking away. So I thought it was that's really quite comical. Even if it's something very important, I said, just call me another 3 minutes, I'll be outside the door, and I'll go out in the street, or hot outside, I'll talk. And all of a sudden, he fishes around, he didn't have his trousers. He fished around in the trousers, and he produces another one. And here he is talking, he's talking this one in the mikvah, he's looking at this one, in the mikvah. That's it, he comes into Ayin Beis, and we're talking about Choishet Boer. If Amela kommt you're worried about the word Atzilus. We're talking about Kesser. What he means is that he doesn't mean Olam Atzilus. He means he brought it about there. He made it appear in that way. You follow? So he made Kesser appear in such a way that it's Choishet. And therefore, kommt is that the Eibishter made a Choishet, which is really Oyer, but it's Choishet. Why? Because the ultimate purpose is the Makablim. Elegavi the Makablim, this is Choishet. And Adarabah, das is the Pshat. Yetzirah Veirei Choishet. So I felt the shy, why would the Eibishter create a negative thing? Choishet was not a Geschmack. Why would he create? No, he said Choishet is part of the whole system. Yetzirah Veirei Choishet. And what does he want to teach you about the Eibishter? That Kesser, with all its mile, is not Gilui. And Chochmah is Gilui. And in them part, Chochmah is much more the ultimate purpose of it than Kesser. That's all he's trying to teach you, the Eibishter. Adafar, he said, "Ubriya b'fnei atzmo." So uchidua, shachoishach enerach heder oyer. You can't tell me that choishach is just not oyer. Ki'im hu briya b'fnei atzmo. Ulamayla min oyer. It's even higher than the imam of oyer. Okay, shekazu yeitzerer uvoirei choishach. And it's well known that the deal voirei means yesh mi ayin. In other words, the choishach came from a much higher inyan. It came from the ultimate koyach of the atmos. L'hamtzi yesh mina ayin. Yoitzer means that once you already got the yesh, you shape it further. Himself, he said that oil is only yetzira v'yilu choishach in the etzemina von bria yesh mina ayin. So he said there's a mile in the inyan von choishach. After Pekain, it's choishach, it's not oil. It's not gilui legavi the makablim. Rafa, it's called choishach. And one minute nimtzalaf is there that not that choishach is a negative thing, not that choishach, and therefore he shoyl the inyan, because berega what you say choishach is heder ha'oyer, then you has a word being poigim in the inyan of choishach. And you say, listen, we got oyer. If you want to just sort of be not oyer and you want to be the opposite of oyer, then you're choishach. That's a, how do you call it, that's a moral pagia in the Inyan von Choshech. Overall, what you say, no, Choshech is a bria b'fnei atzmai. Choshech is a Inyan, what the Eivus has got in that. Yeah. And the Hainu, he wants it to be a Zayin, which is higher than the Makablim. Yeah. And he calls that the Inyan von Choshech. Yesh b'zeh shnei Inyanim. Aleph, that's a Inyan von Choshech, too high for the Makablim, a very amazing high Inyan, and that's high Choshech. Aber sof kol sof, you put on tefillin and you say Yitzhareru v'yirei Choshech, and that sticks out on your cup and it's makiv. You come over and tell mitzvah, meaning that right now for you there's a Choshech. Aber sof kol sof, you're going to get it, that boy. You'll eventually make that Choshech also oil. That'll eventually become oil. Fadir. But if it was just head or a header can't become a do it. And so when does that happen? Shabbos. Shabbos, the Eivus waits until Shabbos, and then that makiv that was in the tefillin goes down into the panimi. That makiv becomes a panimi on Shabbos, and what happens the next Sunday? A much bigger makiv is an imshach. Kakatu. It comes to it that every week you put on a new pair of tefillin. Maybe some people manage to do that. I don't know. You have to be very rich. When you invent it, is it you put it on. Right. You were told you become takanosha. You become new to it. Choshech, and Choshech is a brio, and it's a new Inyan, and it's only Choshech like Abi you, because you're eating gila, you're in his gila, you're a makabel, you have to have gila. Or eventually you get to that, because you put on 2 pairs of, I mean, when I say 2 pairs of tefillin, you can put on 4 if you want, but you put on 2 tefillin each time round, יש לומר דבשר שם זהו בחינת הכסף והחוכמה שהוא in Choshech v'oyer choymer v'tzura or even more. He said, what is the meaning from choymer? Choymer is the mitzvah a goof, as it were. The emes a kli is the meaning from choymer, and tzura is the neshama. So he said, ultimately speaking, like we said, where do you get the meaning from bria? Bria, emes the meaning from choymer, which is the meaning from kli. Where does that come from? From bria yesh me? Yeah, yesh me ayin. He said, you don't play down that choshech. It's a very, very high inyan, and the ultimate tachlis is the inyan from the choymer, and the inyan from upper. It's not oil. And what is the inyan from oil? This is tzura. That's what shapes everything. What makes everything have its right proportion, to use the English expression, its right shape, is the inyan from oil. What is lichtigkeit? Then there's proper proportion. Choymer, keli is a big thing. What he's about to say, if you chase after the keli, then you fall into Gashmias and Chumias. Yeah. And where there's no lichtigkeit, it can be as high as you like. There's got to be lichtigkeit. For the Nehemiah, there has to be lichtigkeit. So what should you used to be saying? Well, we want lichtigkeit now. I don't know if there's sugar in a choshech. המאמר is a choshech v'choymer b'tzura. וכמו כן הוא בעבודה. הביטול שמבחינת הכסר הוא ביטול של המים ותעבודה לגמרי. There's a ביטול כאילו mentions b'choshech. He doesn't really know what the heck. All he knows is he's going to give himself away, and he does it any יודע משום דבר. וכמו ברוסה דליבה שהוא מבחינת רוצן Posher. Now, when he says in Rusha Deliba, it's one on. In Rusha Deliba, there are 2 different levels. And therefore, in Tanya, there ought to be in a couple of places, in Chelik Rishon, he mentions Rusha Deliba. There he means that there's a certain shaykhs to din van Askola, Asoga is bonnet. Here he means Rusha Deliba in the sense of the Etzem Rotzen Poshut, and therefore he teaches Rotzen Poshut. The Etzem Amitius Inyan, or the Etzem Anashoma going up into Elikus. He says, being an emuna peshuta. Peshuta means no tziyah, no yediyah, no nothing, just absolute given awayness, absolute devotedness to a cause. Va'bidl shim tada chochma. This is most. I tell you, Bittul shel mitzad hachokma has a bittul shel mitzad yediyah. So he says, you don't know anything, but you do. When you bought mitzad chokma, there's a lichtigkeit in it. It's something is being made to you, and you are aware of what you're bottled. You maybe can't tell everybody with all the details about it, but you can't not tell anybody either. You can't say, well, I can't tell you anything, I don't know anything. You do, and you're aware. So it's a bittul which is mitzad awareness, but it's an amazing awareness. It's like a, how do you call it, a getlacha awareness, a divine awareness, and that's chokma. So come to this, when you are involved in a bittul mitzad chokma, to a certain extent you know what you're doing. How do you call it? You're a guided bottle. Yes. A bittul shemchai is a bittul shemitzad yediyah. Dimi yoish is a bittul amiti. It's ever so bittul. Lefisha ain't a bittul shemitzad asoger. Oh, you see, I've been telling you the whole time that yediyah doesn't mean asoger. Shehu bittul hayesh bilvat. When you know really what you're doing, you're just hayesh. Karei asoger he b'chinas matzias delakos. Yaveda the reva neshomas ba'asoger v'izbonas belakos. Shali deiseh he yitzia mina yeshes. Maximum you get out of yeshes with the mit. Yeah, in other words. Huh?
We're in previous mind, but in La'atid, has like a samahus.
Yeah, yeah. Another, Yeshomiti. Yeah. He said, the Beheda Aveda, Hariunim Shach, Achrei, Achum Yisvayis. It's amazing, in Vadarov Hashav, it's a, it's not an easy game. He always shows you that if you're not involved in Aveda, I looked up the other day. Somebody told me about a lashon that occurs in Takin this year in Tov Reish Samtet. We're finishing now. Tov Reish Samtet. I know it's a bit heavy. Tov Reish Samtet. It's too cold. I'm saying, yeah. I'll just hold out another minute. I said Tov Reish Samtet. And over there, the Rebbe Shab goes with this amazing whole long, beautiful, mind-boggling. You see, one of the sikhs over there. And then all of a sudden he said, "Alle das alles, die Schatze die was vernehmen sich mit Aveda." He said, so, he said, wegen die was vernehmen sich clownish mit Aveda, redt man clownish. He said, but those who are not busy with Aveda at all, we're not even talking. So I mean, in those days it was, it was heavy going. It was really, you had to toe a certain line in order to be, however, the Rebbe says here, if you're involved in a way different road in the Shomas, at least you get out of yeshes. I mean, you haven't got terribly high, but at least you got out of yeshes. He said, but if you don't have a way to beklau, then you just nimm so hachum is wer. ועל ידי הווידה נעשה ביטל היש שנעשה בחידס קירוב ללכוס וחופץ בלכוס. So that's all a soga. You feel yourself near. Why? Because you want to know about Alakus. You want to be involved. But it's all you. It's Bina. He said, "Bittul to Chochma. Liyesh is so begins Rias Mahus Alakus." Now here, Shalom Aleichem. This is only a Shinoi Eloshen. Up to now I've been saying Yediyah. And now he says, the Rias Mahus Alakus, Harizah begins Bittul Amiti. ומכל מוקים, הרי זה ביטל שמצד הידיעה דווקא. Das Ayin from Yediyah. What sort of Yediyah? The Yediyah that comes by way of Ruyas Hama. In other words, something you have got out of the deal. It's a tremendously high union, but you have become more illuminated and aware of the whole union. In Bittul Shalomayla Mitam Vadas Lagarme Atala Deklum Mitad the etzim giving away of yourself, maybe that's got a mila. Over here you know exactly what you're doing, even though in a way you don't really, but you do, because you, as it were, you almost see it. And since you almost see it, then you know very well what you're doing, and you're illuminated, and you, nonetheless, you're bottled be etzem ma'ushelcha, not just because you would like to be here. You are in it. Now, vehu. There's a famous beer. Yeah, Zeh Keli, V'an Vehu. If Zeh Keli, if you really come to know about Elikus, Aniva Hu, An Vehu, makes the two words, Aniva Hu. Da Bittel Hu, between Ani, Vehu, Chad. I and him become one. In other words, Zeh Keli, if you have Gila Elikus Alidei, Emes awareness of Elikus, V'an Vehu, Aniva Who? You and the Aves will become one. And you know the first part of it. The first part of it says, or if you say Elokai Avi, Varemamenu. If you say, oh yes, oh, because the Aves are my fathers, and I just have, I have a certain Amunah because it comes from my forefathers, then it's Varemamenu, then you send him up into the heights. Or if you say, Zeh Keli, what this is mine, Elikus, I've taken that into my life. Vian Ve, who, and Eva who, Bechinas Chad. And remember, those are the guys. Is what are we going to do?
Sure.
We got to bring Mashiach, guys. We got to bring him.
Make a hackle.
It's got to happen before Mamish. It's got to happen before Mamish. It's got to be. I can tell the story now, but I haven't got any clear. I can tell you. Just very brief. I take on myself a little bit. The whole story. I get these little things. I've got a little card that's written on it about the Shin Kovtes. The quote from. Doesn't say anything about Chabad. Doesn't say Tzach or this or that. Or Yichadinah. Doesn't say. It doesn't say anything. Just a little white thing. This is Shin Kovtes written on it, and saying what do we do? Why are we looking after ourselves? That's what he said. So I go into the mikveh and I spread it around the place where it's mutar to put it. I put it here, I put it there, I put it in another place. And I know the people read it because I find it in different places. I come into the mikveh and it's all around the place. They can't throw it away because it's just a quote from the Shulchan Aruch. Well, they're scared to throw it into the rubbish tin. So I write on a little sort of heoras, a little sort of pirushim. So one day I put it in without heoras. I thought, I just didn't have any time. I'm tremendous sorry. I put it in. I didn't write any heoras on it. So I get it back. And it's written Shtusim B'Havolim in big letters. This is Shtusim B'Havolim. I had to quote from the Shulchan Aruch. What's for Shtusim B'Havolim? He said, Kozman. It was like one of the big machas apparently. He said, Kozman she'onu b'golos anu chayovim lehichona lagoy. כך הוא כותב. חייבים להיכון לגוי, ואי אפשר לנו לעשות מאומה, מייסר מזה, and a whole big reason we're fafal, we just engulfed, and that's it. So I took that card, and I put underneath the word, the shtusim, put a kav, and I put it down, and I sort of fitted it into the bottom so you wouldn't have to turn it over. I fitted it when I wrote shtusim with a tremendous big question mark and a big exclamation mark. I said, how is it divrei ha-Beis Yosef, the shtusim? And then I said, and then I wrote that Harei halacha zu noheges b'kol hazmanim, v'afilu b'chutz ha'aretz, v'afilu b'zman ha'golos. V'adrabah, ha-Beis Yosef lo asak v'inyonim, wrote b'zman ha'golos. You do it. The Beis Yosef didn't write the halacha when the Beis Hamikdash is gone. V'harei zeh din b'pikuach nefesh b'hilchot Shabbat. The Loma Misalmim, and I put a big question mark. So I came on Sunday morning, and I found that was laying over in another corner. So somebody chucked it away over there. And there was people who looked at it and read it. And so, but you can't do that. If somebody shows you an argument, you can't say, just shtusim v'avolim. That's negative all the klalim. You can't do that. If somebody shows you and only quotes you a certain thing, then you've got to say why you don't agree with it. Say, but he didn't say anything. He didn't be mityeches to the whole halacha b'klal. He just said, "Kol zman shanu b'golos anu chayvim lehichon al hagoy." That's all. That's all they know. They don't even read it. They don't even look into it. So we've got to educate these people. We've got to get at them, and just turn their minds for a little bit. And, we've got to do it because we got to. The world's got to be. The Rebbe said, Kabbalah's name said, we've got to just somehow or another just alter this little tap. You know, just turn the tap that people should start thinking in the way they go. And that's about for Shalom. I can tell you all sorts of, that I know in history when Yidden did try to do that. And the reason they didn't do it in the Maaseh Slav or something like that, why didn't they go out with, I mean, talking about something about 2 million soldiers or something, attacked the whole of Europe. And just squashed the whole of Europe, including all the Yidden. But I wouldn't have helped the poor Yidden to go out with a couple of swords or a couple of hand knives or something and fight these guys. But nowadays, the Tzionim have got all the neshik in the world. They have everything. And so Radi Yosef and all these guys are all sitting there raking in the money somewhere from the Tzionis, the Medina HaTzionia. And they have tremendous power over them. So instead of raking in the money, just say to them, listen, this is a din show. You be Mekayim that for us. We'll support your government, we'll give everything you want. Just take your neshik and put these guys out of order. Because instead of giving them everything, just do the Aper. And they don't want to do it. And so they're months, they're terror, so we can't do it because we're in the government. Do you guys agree? This is Orient. Let's go for the government.
Yeah.